Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Neufang with the Global Business Travel Association. And with the news that the US borders are opening up, now more people than ever are figuring out what is needed in this post-pandemic world to get where they need to go, especially for business trips and meetings. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by Preston Peterson with American Airlines to teach us a little bit about some easy tools to be able to make that work. Preston, I've heard a lot about Sherpa. Tell me what's so great about Sherpa.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. So there's some key things that we've looked at over the course of the pandemic with our customers in being able to help them not only understand their requirements for their destination, but also all along the trip that they're taking, because in some cases there are requirements for customers to complete even for connecting airports. And so we really want to make sure they have that whole view of what their itinerary will look like on the dates that they're traveling and based on their country of origin, their own personal circumstances, whether they need tests or vaccines or whatever the case might be. And we've partnered with Sherpa, an excellent company that gives customers that ability to research their trip, understand what those requirements are, so that they feel a little bit less stressed when it comes to making their plans for that trip, and so that they know, here's what I need to complete and in the timeframes that I need to complete them. So we're very excited to partner with them on that. And given that, I wanted to share a quick demo with you about the Sherpa tool itself, how it's used, how intuitive it is. So I'm going to go ahead and share that demo right now. And I'm going to start actually, Suzanne, from the GBTA webpage, just so that everybody can get that frame of reference of where to start from. Very helpful, by the way. Thank you for putting a link right there on the very front of the page, because this really makes it easy for people to go take a look at it. So you just click on the Sherpa website there on the main GBTA page, and it'll take you to the landing page for American Airlines and Sherpa. And what I would recommend is, really, if you want to explore destinations that are open, you can click on the travel restrictions map. What I'd recommend is coming up here, clicking on the travel restrictions page, if you have in mind where your trip will be. And really, this is pretty simple. A lot of binary questions here. Are you taking a round trip? Do you have connections? Are you vaccinated? And where are you starting? So I'm going to walk you through an outbound trip, assuming that you start in the United States, connecting in London Heathrow with an ultimate destination of Berlin, Germany. So to do that, I'm going to do a one-way, and we're going to say that there is a connection in London Heathrow, going to assume that the traveler is fully vaccinated, since many countries require that today, and we're starting in the United States. So I am based out of Dallas-Fort Worth, so we're going to type in Dallas-Fort Worth as our starting point, connecting in London Heathrow. And the great thing about the tool is you may know the airport code or you may not, and it's been built for that, as you can see here. So you can type in LHR or you can type in London. If you type in London, it's going to give you the different airports around the London area. So it's good flexibility there for customers who may not, like us airline geeks, know all the different codes for the different airports. And then lastly, typing in Berlin. And so now I'm set. I've got my one-way, the outbound. There is an outbound connection, fully vaccinated, starting in the United States. Now, one important thing to make sure of is that you type in an accurate departure date. With all of the changes happening with regards to COVID requirements, you need to make sure you're putting in the right dates, because these requirements can change on a moment's notice. So we're going to assume that, we're traveling, let's call it after everything has been lifted from the European perspective. So we'll say we're traveling on November 12th. So you click on the See Restrictions tab. And the great thing about this is it's going to show all of your different travel requirements on one page. And you can click down and dive further into the Sherpa tool itself to understand some of the requirements. Now, at the very top, it's going to show the trip summary. There's some quick facts. It's, you may have to have a COVID test. Quarantine may or may not happen for you. There's going to be documents and a visa. So it tells you everything in that summary, what you need to start thinking about relative to your trip. And one of the really great features of Sherpa is that it talks about the connections. And this is really important, because not every country has a requirement that if you have a connection that you have to fulfill those requirements in that particular country. But for the United Kingdom, you do. And so it's going to show you that here. It does say that transit is allowed with restrictions for vaccinated travelers. You do not have to have a negative COVID test, but you do have to fill out a passenger locator form. And the good thing about this is if you have to complete something, for example, the passenger locator form, you can click here, to see details. And instead of taking you to a separate page, it's a pop-up window. So you haven't lost your place on the previous window on those instructions. It's just a pop-up, and you can read through exactly what it is that's required. And the great part about this is it has a link. So now I could click on Complete Online, and this is going to take me to that passenger locator form for the United Kingdom to complete it there. So everything's really self-contained within Sherpa. The other great thing about it that I like, and I've traveled internationally a few times, but if you go down here to the bottom, you're going to see this. Well, first of all, you're going to see the details and exemptions. So there are some carve-outs. You can go see if you're part of those exemptions or not. But the other great thing about it is it gives you the source. So if you need to know, like, hey, where does this information come from? Who is providing this? You can click on the exact website for the United Kingdom where it provides all of these requirements. And I think that's really a great tool for customers who really want that peace of mind. They want to see the source. And so you can click through that here. It even tells you when it was last updated. So all of this information really is here at your fingertips within Sherpa. So now that we've seen that, that's just one example of how you can click through and see some of those details. That's just for our connection. Now we're going to go down to our final destination, and we'll see similar information here. Travel is allowed with restrictions for vaccinated travelers. You don't need a negative COVID test, but you may need to quarantine. So I'm going to go, oh, what do I have to do to quarantine? So I'm going to go and look in these details and see what is required for that quarantine, if there is one. And you can see here that, vaccinated travelers coming from the United States can be exempted from the quarantine unless they have spent time in a designated area. And you would have to actually go into the source to understand those designated areas, because that's a list that's updated. And you'll see here it provides that link to those designated areas. So again, another good example of providing that really granular, detailed information to the customer so that they fully understand their requirements. Now, the good thing is that in addition to what you need to travel, it's also going to tell you, do you need a visa or not? And for Germany, if you're a U.S. citizen, you do not need that visa. But then there's other forms and documents that are available to you at the bottom here. There may be some indoor requirements in Germany. You need to show your proof of vaccination if you're in certain venues. So it provides more than just your travel information here at the bottom. It also provides you what you may need to know when you arrive in your destination. And so this is just a very great way for customers to get a view on what they need to do to travel, and even a little bit of what they will need when they arrive in their destination. So this is an example of what it looks like to go from the United States into a foreign country. And now I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what it might look like to go back into the United States. So we're going to come up here, we're going to change this. We're going to hit the edit button, and we're going to go to, let's call it Rome. So we're going to say that this is a direct flight from Rome back to DFW. We're not going to be connecting, so we're going to take that off here. No connections. It's one way, fully vaccinated, and we'll say that we're traveling soon. We did a quick business trip, so we're going to be coming back next Tuesday. So we can click on the see restrictions for this. Oh, I have Berlin here. I need to go type that back in as DFW. We're going to click see restrictions to go from Rome on a direct flight to Dallas-Fort Worth. Now you'll notice here that this says that most travelers from Rome are not allowed to enter Dallas-Fort Worth yet. So this still takes into account the restrictions that are in place because of the 212F mandate. So you'll notice here the entry is restricted for most international travel. Now I can go and see that detail here by clicking on that pop-up, and I'm going to see that if international travelers who have been in or transited through Italy in the past 14 days, they won't be allowed to enter the United States. And I can see all of that detailed information here, what the exemptions are for that. And I can see that if I'm an American citizen, a legal permanent resident, certain family members, students, a fiance, or other travelers who might be an exemption, they can apply for that exemption. So it lists clearly what those exemptions are for travelers going to the United States, even though it does tell you at the beginning of this that, hey, entry is probably restricted for most people. You might want to look into these details. Now, another piece that it does provide here that we didn't see previously was proof of negative COVID-19 test results. So if you are able to enter the United States, then you will need to be able to show that you have a negative COVID test. And the important thing about looking at these details inside of Sherpa is that it's going to tell you the specific type of test that you need. And this is really important because some countries allow for antigen or PCR tests. Other countries have just a PCR requirement, or some mix of them, limited use cases of, well, you can take this antigen test, but not that one. So it's really important to come into these pop-up windows and see the different types of tests that are permitted for that particular destination. So in this case, it's very specific that the customer needs to have an original printed or electronic negative COVID-19 test result, and it must be performed no more than 3 days before the first scheduled departure. So this is the key information for customers: is it can be antigen or PCR, and it must be performed 3 days before. So now the customer has the information that they need, and there's even more details below about what type of test it can be. Can it be an at-home test? Can it not? And then it even gives the information that some U.S. states might have more strict rules. And this is particularly important for those jurisdictions, whether it's the United States or other countries, that have locally more restrictive rules. So think Hawaii in this case, where you have to have a different set of procedures and policies to get into Hawaii. And that is something that you might want to know. And so it tells you, check into those local restrictions for your particular destination state. So this is just, again, another helpful pop-up so that customers can see what is needed for a COVID test. And then it even goes into some of that additional information where in some places you may need a mask. You can see that pop up and go take a look and see where that might be required. So this is just a quick overview of how the Sherpa tool works. There's a lot of different inputs you can have to this. You can search any combination of airports throughout the world really to see what the restrictions and requirements are going to be, so that you're prepared ahead of time and you know that you can book that trip with confidence and enjoy your travels.
Preston, that was a great view. It makes me want to book more travel because now we have a source to be able to tell us the ins and outs. I too have traveled a bit internationally and domestically, and certainly internationally. The confusing rules and how things work is something that creates some anxiety. So I think your sponsorship of this for GBTA members and all of our constituents is so much appreciated. Thank you for demonstrating this to us today, and I look forward to using it in the future.
Excellent. Thanks, Suzanne.